Morning, Year 10, and welcome to the second lesson on Loom that we'll be doing today. Today's lesson is on your second homework question. Thank you very much to those of you that produced the last one. There were some excellent examples, particularly the ones where people had clearly written the answer and then used this video to check. So, as per a couple of people's requests from last week's video, I'm going to focus a bit more on the content, so the actual history that you'll need to answer this question rather than the structure. So the question that you've been given is at the top of your screens. You can see it now. It's a write an account question of how events in Morocco in 1905 to 1906 became an international crisis. In this video, I'm going to go through all of the key information that you'll need to answer that question. So again, as usual, feel free to pause at points that you think things are useful and take notes from the screen. You won't need anything other than a pen and paper. So, Morocco. This is a map of Africa, and I just wanted to show you initially where Morocco is. So Morocco is this relatively small country in North Africa, which in 1905 was independent, which means it wasn't controlled by any other countries. It was a key strategic location for a lot of countries, and a lot of countries were interested in Morocco because it was close to Spain and the Mediterranean, which were very, very important trade points for lots of the European powers, the likes of France, England, Germany, Spain. Lots of them wanted access to the Mediterranean, and if they could control Morocco, they'd have that access. If you look at this map, actually now, you can see that a lot of the rest of Africa was already controlled by European powers. And actually, this being 1914, France on here is already controlled by Morocco. Morocco is already controlled by France, but that wasn't the case in 1905. So, key terms that I think would be useful. You might just want to have a read through these and note them down. They would all be useful to use in your answers. Most of them should be familiar. The one that I think we maybe haven't covered in as much detail as others in class is splendid isolation. So this was the British idea, originally invented in the late 19th century, that Britain were not going to become involved in any problems within Europe. They were going to focus on their empire, which was making them very wealthy. They weren't going to get involved in problems of other European powers fighting for power in Europe. And that idea was called splendid isolation. And the Moroccan crisis is a very important turning point because it's sort of when we see the end of splendid isolation for the British and the English. They start to get involved in European politics. So, 1905, as I've said, we've got Morocco in the top of North Africa, key strategic location because of its proximity to Spain, and it's got lots of ports on the Mediterranean. In 1905, Morocco's independent. It's not controlled by any other country. It's controlled by a sultan, a term that you will have seen in the keywords, who is effectively like their king and runs the country. Most countries in Europe in 1905 had also agreed that France should control most of the country. They've got a lot of, as you can see here, a lot of countries around Morocco are already controlled by France, and so it was believed by countries like Spain, England, and France, obviously themselves, that the French should have some form of control over Morocco. However, a key character in this whole crisis, Kaiser Wilhelm II, disagreed. And so on the 31st of March 1905, he rode into a major city in Morocco called Tangiers on a white horse and declared that he believed that Morocco should remain independent, that France and other European countries didn't have a right to control it, and that he, as a newly important world leader, thought that that independence should be protected. So, in 1905, French and English became closer. They heard the Kaiser saying that Morocco should be independent and thought that was in neither of their countries' interests, and so started to work together more closely. This led to a conference called the Algeciras Conference, which was called in 1906 in Spain, where France, Britain, Germany, along with a selection of other European countries, said we need to sit down together at a conference and decide what we're going to do with the issue of Morocco, who is going to control the country. And at this conference, France and Britain, along with a whole host of other countries, worked together to make sure that Germany wouldn't have any control of Morocco and that France would get to control parts of Morocco. At the Algeciras Conference in 1906, it was decided that France would control Morocco's ports with their police. Germany was given nothing. And this had some important consequences for the stability of Europe and peace in Europe, and also the feelings of the Kaiser and the other countries involved. So the consequences of the Moroccan crisis. In the short term, England and France became closer. England had come out of splendid isolation. It had started working with other countries in Europe, and that had been quite successful. That's something that was going to keep happening after 1905. In the long term, the Kaiser was humiliated. After the conference, this was the first time he tried to really get involved in world politics, promote the idea of Weltpolitik, the German idea that Germany as a nation should have more control in the world. And really, he hadn't got anything from it. At the conference, he hadn't built any alliances with other countries. Very few other countries supported him. And equally, he'd been given no control over any countries in Africa. And so, as you'll probably remember from your notes, but you might not, you've got the notes on the front of the sheet that you're writing your answers on as well. The next time there was a problem with Morocco, in 1911, the Kaiser was more aggressive, and he sent a Panther gunboat to try and enforce what he wanted. So coming back to this question, you've got a nice clear structure on the front of your sheets of paper. The way that I would structure it, I'd have one paragraph describing what the Moroccan crisis was in as much detail as possible. And then I'd go on in my second paragraph. In the short term, how did that lead to an international crisis? And then in the long term, how did that lead to an international crisis? Best of luck. I look forward to reading them. Stay safe.